Good day. This is our discussion about risk and capital budgeting part one. So we will be discussing in detail now the relationship between the risk and the capital budgeting process or decision processes or criteria. So actually, the concept of risk was already mentioned in some parts, just like the very first topic about capital budgeting decision processes. However, this will be discussed formally here. All right. So let's begin with our discussions. For starters, we all know that in every business endeavor, there would be risks, and risks are eminent, risks are natural, and would be occurring whether we like it or not in business. And we all know that there are basically some factors that would have impact on determination of the value, or let's just say numerical representation of a risk or what risk is. And then in terms of relationship about the benefits or rewards, you all know that there is direct relationship between the risks and rewards, such that so we will be able to have higher rewards, we need to embrace higher risks. So the higher the risks, the higher the returns and the rewards. All right. Then here is a review about the net present value. So you very well know that for us or you to get net present value, that is NPV, that is going to be the sum of the present value of all cash flows less the cost of the investment. So the CF sub zero here is actually the cost of the investment at time zero, while these items here on the numerator, C then F sub 1 is the cash flow of the first year divided by the quantity 1 plus R, and that is to the power of 1. If we transpose or move this to the numerator, this would become negative 1, and negative 2, negative 3, and so on. So that's why we have here dot 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 plus cash flow of the nth time, then divided by the quantity 1 plus R to the power of n. So that's how the formula would like be. Of course, you have known this from our previous discussions. We all know also that the R represents the discount rate, and this is now the focus of chapter 10. So the risk is represented by the discount rate, and the denominator should reflect opportunity costs to firms, investors. Well, we actually have discussed perhaps in other accounting and management accounting subjects to be more specific about opportunity costs. These actually are the benefits foregone or lost in choosing one alternative over the other. So in a world wherein we have a lot of choices or options or alternatives, should we select one in favor and then we are going to disregard the others, any benefit that is lost is the opportunity cost. Remember, the investors, before deciding to invest in the company, have also other options to consider, most especially with which of those investment opportunities would lead to the highest profit or benefit. In that, if it shows us or this particular proposal, so for sure there will be opportunity cost. And that's the point of including that to R. Then this reflects the project's risk. So the risk on the part of the investor, on the part of the project, and on the part of the market. So at least there are three areas in which the R would be looking into. Now, for the cost of equity, this is basically the cost by which the particular source of financing is being obtained at. Now, when we say equity, we do not only think of the shareholders' equity. We all know that even from accounting one, if we say equity, there are basically two. The creditor's equity, which is the equity of the creditors, meaning the liabilities, and the equity of the owners or shareholders. So these are the two respective sources. On the part of the creditors, well, this is where bonds would be there, the long-term notes, for example, the mortgages, and etc. Well, the equity would be the shares, like ordinary shares and preference shares. So beta plays a central role. Then there's an inclusion here of the term beta, which is actually like a factor that we are going to consider, which is the rate in the market in terms of risk divided by the rate of risk on the individual level, let's just say the project. So meaning this is a ratio, that is the risk of the market divided by the risk in the project. So hopefully you are going to take that down. And then this plays a role in determining whether a firm's cost of equity is going to be high or low. So the cost of equity then can be computed in the next slides that we will have. So what factors that would influence a firm's beta? So we have here the following things. We have the operating leverage and financial leverage. If we say operating, of course, the word is operation, in which we are going to talk about the production, the selling activities, the administrative activities. So that's why we talk about costs, and we talk about income or earnings, and we talk about sales. So this is the mix of fixed and variable cost, and operating leverage is equal to delta, which is the representation of change. This is a Greek symbol. So change of EBIT. EBIT means earnings before interest and taxes, divided by EBIT, divided by change of sales over sales. So this change is actually the comparison of one accounting period over the other, let's say 1 year. So this year ending minus the previous year ending EBIT and divided by the EBIT in the current year. And then this also, so the change of sales, sales of current year minus the previous year divided by the sales of the current year. So that's what operating leverage is all about. For financial leverage, this is the extent to which a firm finances operations by borrowing. So this is more on the debt or the financial obligations. Then for the continuation, let me minimize this and not see the definition. The fixed cost of repaying debt increase a firm's beta or beta in the same way that operating leverage does. So which means that the more fixed costs there are, so the more that the financial leverage would increase. Why is that? Remember, the fixed costs normally are in relation to debt. The borrowings or financial obligations are normally fixed in nature because the amortizations are fixed. So that's why if they would be increasing, especially the fixed costs, the financial leverage would also be increasing in relation to fixed borrowings. And also for the operating leverage, because if there are more fixed costs, this would mean that the EBIT could be lower. So that's the divisor. And then, or the denominator. Then the EBIT also could have a disparity or change. So that's why it would also change in that sense. Right. A simple case. Let's have a bigger presentation. So project discount rate is easy to determine if we assume that firm is financed with 100% equity. So the equity here is probably the shareholders' equity, and project is similar to the firm's existing assets. So same to the existing ones. And then in this case, the appropriate discount rate equals the cost of equity. So hence it's simple. Then the cost of equity can be estimated using the CAPM. CAPM means capital asset pricing model. And the formula is to be shown and discussed more along the way. But here's the formula in which that is the discount rate is then the R sub I with the E here is the cost of equity or the rate of equity, which is equal to the risk-free rate, that's R sub F, plus the beta, and then multiplied with the result, the quantity, the difference between the market rate or cost of equity and then minus the risk-free rate. And we call this the premium. This difference between the rate of equity in the market minus the risk-free rate is the market premium. So on top of the risk-free rate, then there is a premium or a spread or an additional value. So that's the learning point here also. Another one is that actually there is no such thing as zero risk in real world and real sense of it. However, because normally there is lesser changes of values, and the changes of values could be insignificant in shorter periods of time. That is why the risk-free rate normally would be compared to T-bills or treasury bills. For example, they can be like for 3 months or less, so the cash and cash equivalents. In 3 months' time or banking days, there could be lesser changes of the rates or insignificant changes of rates or values. So the reason that T-bills rates are being used here. So I hope that is clear. And this is again the beta or beta. This is again the CAPM pricing model. All right. So let us continue. Here is an example. Carbon Light Incorporated, an all-equity firm, is evaluating a proposal to build a new manufacturing facility, and these are the additional information. Firm manufactures bicycle frames. As a luxury good producer, firm is very sensitive to the economy. Product demand is elastic, so this means that any change of the price, whether that is just small, will result to abrupt and big changes of the quantity demanded or the demand. Now, the Carbon Light stock has a beta of 1.5. As what I've said, the beta is the ratio between the rates or the costs of equities in the market over the cost of the individual stock or equity. So that's 1.5. And then the manager's note risk-free rate is 5% and the market return is 11%. And this is again the difference. 6% is the risk premium or the market premium or market risk premium. So to get the cost of equity for this particular stock and this particular project that's going to be using the CAPM model, capital asset pricing model, and then simplify the value. So this is risk-free rate of 5% plus beta of 1.5, and then 6%, the difference between 11% and 5% for the premium, then simplify. So 6% times 1.5, that's going to be 9%. 5% plus 9% is 14%. So this will be the cost of equity under the capital asset pricing model. So hopefully you got that, guys. Then here is an additional problem, financial data for Carbon Light Incorporated and Fiber Speed Corporation. And here are the given items, fixed cost down to EBIT. For additional information, so just to solve the problems, contribution margin, remember in your discussions about variable costing, in management advisory subjects or management accounting subjects, contribution margin is sales minus the variable cost. We can do this as a whole or per unit. Anyway, the given values are, I suppose, per unit or per bike. So 1,000 minus 400 in dollars, that's 600 for Carbon Light. While for Fiber Speed, that's 1,000 minus 700, that's $300 per bike. Then for EBIT, that is earnings before interest and taxes. So if we are going to compute, so that's $1 million each. And how is that computed? That is 10,000 frames times contribution margin minus the fixed cost per unit or per year in this case. So the good thing normally is that for fixed cost, it will be expressed as a whole. So clearly this is per year, so use it. Anyway, if we are going to extend the analysis, sales minus variable cost per unit, that's contribution margin per unit. If we deduct fixed cost per unit, that's going to be the EBIT per unit. But because the fixed cost is per year, so to have parallels, let's multiply the sales volume, 10,000 frames each for Carbon Light and Speed, then multiply with the contribution margin per bike frame. And we get $1 million for EBIT of each. So that's how we got those values. Anyhow, operating leverage for Carbon Light and Fiber Speed. So we can actually see here the graph. Remember to compute operating leverage. That's the formula again is the change of EBIT over EBIT divided by change of sales over sales. So that's why we have on the x-axis, we have the change in sales. So that's the divisor or the denominator, while the numerator is change of the EBIT. So it's going to result to a slope formula, then y over x, which shows that the higher operating leverage of Carbon Light is reflected in its steeper slope. So of course, if you have higher EBIT, for example, and then divided by same amount of sales, so for sure you are going to have the operating leverage that is higher. And then if, for example, you have lesser change of sales over sales, the denominator, so the operating leverage of one would be higher than the other. Allow me to minimize this to see clearer. And I like this analysis here. This means that EBIT of Carbon Light is more responsive to changes in sales than is the EBIT of Fiber Speed. Anyway, allow me to go back to the given details though. So change of sales, it's not shown here anyhow. This is just like a given information then that if you have higher EBIT and then you have also lower change in sales over sales denominator, so that would result to higher operating leverage. And this means that your EBIT is more responsive to changes in sales if you have higher OL. Okay, the next slide. So the two firms are in the same industry and here are the given items. What if sales volume increases by 10%? So this is the given information like additional one. You can notice they have the same sales volume, same price, same total revenue, of course. The fixed costs are different. The variable costs are different. Total costs are the same and EBIT the same. So what would happen? The EBIT of Carbon Light is actually going to be higher than Fiber Speed because it has higher operating leverage. So Carbon Light's EBIT increases faster because it has high operating leverage. Remember, change in EBIT over EBIT divided by change of sales over sales. So if you have higher sales, then that would result normally to higher EBIT. So if you have higher operating leverage, that would also make your EBIT higher. So it's like going in circles then. Then what about for the effect of financial leverage on shareholders' returns? So we have here the assets, for example, debt is 0. So equity is 100 million. And here it's 50%, 50%. Case number 1, gross return on assets equals 20%. So EBIT is $20 million. Cash to equity is $20 million. And that's why we have ROE. So return on equity is 20 divided by 100 million. In this case, we can really say that equity here is being the shareholders' equity portion. So 20 divided by 100 is 20%, while here that's 16 divided by 50 is 32%. Now, for case number 2, EBIT is at $5 million and then cash to equity. So $5 million also. Then 5 minus 4 EBIT is earnings before interest and taxes minus interest. That's earnings before taxes. So we assume anyway that they would go directly to equity for the ordinary shareholders if taxes are zero and we don't have any dividends. So should we divide that by the amount of equity we get, the ROE, return on equity, at 5% and 2% respectively. So the ROE or return on equity would change depending, of course, on the given amounts in the problem. Financial leverage makes firm two's ROE more volatile, so its beta or beta will be higher. The question though is, how come it is volatile? So remember, the financial leverage as discussed by us is the fixed borrowings or debt is here in firm 2, or in example for firm 2. So you can notice that there is already a debt here, $50 million, that is half of assets, as opposed to firm 1, which is $0. So in that case, that would make firm 2 having a higher financial leverage over the other. And that would again result to ROE more volatile because its beta is higher. Next is weighted average cost of capital, or WACC. So this would be when we have multiple securities issued and there would be differences in terms of the costs of equity of each. So cost of equity applies to projects of an all equity firm. But what if there is both debt and equity? And this is akin to finding expected return of portfolio. Portfolio will be a combination of 2 or more securities. And that's why we are going to use the weighted average cost of capital, or WACC, then as our discount rate. So Lux in a Box is a chain of fast food stores with the following information. Equity, we have here cost at 15%. Bonds, $50 million, half of $100 million equity. Then the discount rate, this is the rate of the equity or cost of equity. This is the cost of debt, 9%. And assume that the investment structure considered will not change the cost structure also, or the financial structure. So to continue, how do we calculate the WACC? If firm has long-term debt as well as preferred and common stocks. So to get the weighted average cost of capital, that would be the ratio of each. So how do we get the ratio? That would be the debt. So the value of the debt over the sum of the 3 debt, then the cost of E, which is the common stock, and P, preferred stock. E or ordinary shares, and P for preference shares. And then whatever would be the ratio to be multiplied with the respective rates of each. So here's an example. We have the following given items, so please take note. For the debt, let's begin. We have here at the bottom, so that's $47.1 million. Coupon rate is 8%, but yield to maturity, which is normally the one that is to be used as the discount rate, 7%. Notes sell at premium and worth $49 million. While for the P, preferred shares at 200,000 preferred shares, we have 10% rate of return and $16 million in value. For the common shares is at $50, 1 million units, and then the cost of the equity or of ordinary or common shares is 15%. So the question now is to compute the weighted average cost of capital for complex capital structure. So here we have to get the, again, allow me to have a lower, I cannot see the value. So the sum of the following items, so debt, preferred, and the common stock or ordinary shares. So that would be 49 plus the 16 and plus 50. So what we are going to do then is to get the sum of their fair values. Remember, the debt is at $49 million. Preferred shares is $16 million, while $50 million for common for a total $115 million. And we are going to put such in the denominator. The numerator would be, of course, the fair values of each respectively. And we multiply with their respective cost also to get the weighted average cost of capital at 10.9%. Now, normally this is the real situation though, because for a certain corporation, like the big ones, there would be multiple capital sources of financing that would be considered, whether that's a debt, or to be more specific, that could be a long-term note, or that could be also bonds. So for sure, there would be different costs of each. And for the equity, well, we only have two, the preferred and common. So that two could be available. Preferred could not be available at times, but common stock will be there. All right, so to continue to the next slide, rules for finding the right discount rate. When all equity firm invests in an asset similar to its existing assets, the cost of equity is the appropriate discount rate. We've said this already a while ago. However, if there would be multiple or there would be complex capital structures, for example, a while ago, so for sure we are going to utilize another rate, which is the weighted average cost of capital. That's number two. For number three, when the investment is more risky than the firm's average investment, it's possible that there would be a higher discount rate than the weighted average cost of capital that is required, and vice versa. And if less risky, that's the point of vice versa, then the discount rate would be lower than the weighted average cost of capital. All right, so what about for taxes? Although this is not that particularly important in case of like being in the Philippines, but let's discuss this anyhow. We have thus far assumed away taxes, which are often important in financing decisions. So tax deductibility of interest payments favors use of debt, because the more interests there are, then the more expenses there are also, so the lesser the profits there would be. Therefore, we will have tax savings then, or lower taxes. The opportunity to deduct interest payments reduces the after-tax cost of debt and then changes the WACC formula. That's true, because if the given rate is at 100%, so we have to deduct the tax cost of debt, of course, that's a 40%. So that's going to be, assuming a while ago that the cost of debt is 15%. So we multiply that with 60%, that is 100% less the 40% tax. Accounting for taxes doesn't change the rules for selecting the discount rate, of course. So again, if there is like all equity, so use the equity. If complex or combinations of sources of financing, both debt and equity, or just equity, but there are two available items, preferred and the common stock. So we're going to use the weighted average cost of capital. Then what about the break-even analysis? So this is the point where there is no profit, no loss situation. This means that revenues equal cost. Managers often want to assess business value drivers. So what costs for the company's rewards or values to increase? The finding of the break-even point is that useful then, and often useful for assessing operating risk, because we have to take note that the moment that we are above break-even point, that's the time that we are going to have our profit with every unit moving. And lower than the break-even point is the losing point, wherein we also lose 1 unit for every contribution margin. And of course, that's with the basis with the fixed expenses as fixed. Break-even point is that level of output where all operating costs, whether fixed and variable, are covered already. So this is how we compute the break-even point, though in terms of the direction here is fixed cost over contribution margin. It's not stated. This could be percentage. If this is percentage, and that would result to pesos. But if this is per unit, so we will get the break-even point in units. So this is discussed in cost accounting part 2, especially with the discussions of the CVP, cost volume profit analysis. So to expound, that's fixed cost, and to get the contribution margin per unit, that is sales minus variable cost per unit, of course. Then here is an analysis. So this will be our ending slide for part 1. So this is a graph wherein the x-axis would be the units, while the y would be the pesos, the cost, and revenues. You can see here the total revenue increasing. It's 0 with the 0 sales, of course, or 0 units available, and would increase per unit sold. Well, total cost would be, of course, with fixed, even at 0, that would be at certain amount, $5 million, but would change or increase because of the variable cost available for every unit produced. Take note that revenues will be changing depending on the units sold, while total cost will be changing depending on the units produced. While the point of intersection of the graph or curve or line of total revenue and total cost would be the break-even point. And this could be a certain peso. It's not shown here, it's not clear. I cannot decipher it that by just looking, but it's given here the break-even point in units at 8,333 units. All right. So thank you very much for listening for this session, part 1. Hopefully you learned something for today, and I'll see you next time for the continuation. Bye for now.